The wire transfer cleared at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning. $12,000. My mother had called the Sunday before, her voice dropping into that particular register she reserved for financial emergencies somewhere between genuine distress and practiced performance. The restaurant was bleeding money. A broken walk-in freezer, a vendor invoice 60 days past due, a payroll she couldn't make. I told her I'd handle it. I always handled it. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was in the middle of a quarterly review. I stepped away from my laptop to read it. It wasn't a thank you. It was a group text. My mother, my father, and my sister, all three of them on the thread. My sister had written the message, but I knew my mother had approved every word before she hit send. Hey everyone. So excited for the engagement photos this weekend. Dad already has the guest room ready and we booked the photographer for Saturday morning. Quick note, we're keeping it immediate family only for this one so the photos look cohesive. We need everyone to match the vibe Marcus's family is used to. Love you all. Talk soon. I read it 3 times. My sister's name is Claire. Her fiancé is Marcus. Marcus comes from old Atlanta money, the kind that has a foundation named after it. And apparently, I did not match the vibe. I had just sent $12,000 to save the restaurant my parents had been running for 19 years. The confirmation email was still open in another tab. I didn't respond to the group text. I closed my phone, set it face down on my desk, and sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then I opened my laptop and logged back into the quarterly review. My name is Nora. I am 32 years old. I have a master's degree in software engineering, and 18 months ago, I sold my stake in a B2B analytics company for $8.5 million. I left quietly, the way I do most things, and moved into the house I had been renovating for the better part of 2 years. My family did not know about the house. They did not know about the sale. They knew I worked in tech, drove a sensible car, and wore clothes without visible logos. My mother had once described me to a neighbor as the one who's still figuring things out. My sister had told Marcus's family that I was a developer at a mid-size firm technically accurate for the years before the exit, which she had not updated since because it suited the story she preferred to tell. I had let them believe what they wanted. I wasn't performing modesty. I was just tired of being the topic of conversations I wasn't in. I picked up my phone and looked at the text again. The timestamp on my wire transfer, 11:47. The group text had come in at 12:03, 16 minutes after the money cleared. There was nothing accidental about that timing. I set my phone down and looked out the window at the property. From my home office, I could see the western pasture, the old stone fence running along the tree line, and the mountain ridge beyond it, blue-gray in the November light. 8.5 acres in the Shenandoah Valley, 40 minutes outside Charlottesville. The main house was a restored 1890s farmhouse white clapboard with black shutters, a wraparound porch, and ceilings that cleared 10 feet in every room. The guest cottage sat 100 yards down the gravel path, and the restored barn beyond that had been converted into an event space I had never actually used for an event. The property was appraised at $3.8 million. I had never mentioned it to my family because I had never been asked. My mother called me the reliable one when she needed something and the antisocial one when the subject changed. My father thought I was doing fine, meaning he did not think about me often enough to have a more specific opinion. My sister had spent the better part of our childhood making sure I understood exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. And apparently she was still managing that hierarchy for Marcus and his family, and I was still being quietly edited out of the frame. I opened my contacts. Not my close friends, not my colleagues. I scrolled to the names I almost never called because my family's particular brand of social management had made those calls difficult over the years. My mother's sister, Diane. My parents had stopped inviting Diane to holidays 3 years ago after she left her husband. My father had called it too much drama, and my mother had agreed, the way she always agreed with him, with a silence that passed for consent. Diane lived alone in Knoxville now. She had sent me a birthday card every year without fail, even during the years I had been too deep in startup grind to call her back. I kept scrolling. My father's old business partner, Raymond. He and my father had co-owned the restaurant for the first 7 years before a falling out over money that my father had never fully explained and that my mother had compressed into Raymond made some bad choices. Raymond had been at every holiday table for my entire childhood. Then one summer he wasn't, and nobody said his name again. I had run into him at a Home Depot in Cincinnati 4 years ago and he had hugged me like I was still 12. Then my grandmother's contact. My mother's mother, 81 years old, living in a mid-tier assisted living facility in Columbus because, as my mother had explained, when the decision was made, the nicer place was simply outside the budget. I had toured the nicer place once, on my own, without telling anyone. The budget comment had never sat right with me. I stared at these 3 names for a long time. Then I started making calls. Before any of the calls, I looked up the assisted living facility. I spoke with the director at the higher-end place 3 miles away, the one with the garden program and the chef-prepared meals and the art therapy my grandmother had been asking about for 2 years. There was a room available. The monthly difference was considerable. I gave them my card number and told them I would handle the transfer paperwork by end of week. Then I called Diane. She picked up on the second ring, and when I told her I wanted her to come to Virginia for Thanksgiving, she went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'd love that." Nora, in a voice that told me she had not been expecting an invitation from anyone this year. Raymond laughed when he heard my voice. I told him I had a guest cottage with a fireplace and a kitchen fully stocked for the holiday, and I would like him to come. He said, "Are you serious?" And I said I was, and he said he'd drive up Thursday morning. My grandmother was the last call. I told her I was moving her to the new facility at the beginning of December, that everything was handled, that she didn't need to worry about the cost or her daughter's reaction, and that this weekend I wanted her to come to my house for Thanksgiving. The silence that followed lasted long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then she said, "You have a house?" And I said yes. She said, "A real house?" And I laughed and told her it had a porch with a mountain view and I would pick her up myself Friday morning. Thanksgiving fell on a Thursday that year. Claire's engagement photo weekend was Saturday and Sunday. My parents' house was in Gahanna, a suburb of Columbus, about 7 hours from the valley by car. I hired a catering company out of Charlottesville. Heritage turkey, butternut bisque, homemade rolls, roasted root vegetables, a charcuterie spread that ran the full length of the outdoor table, and 2 pies from a bakery in town that had a 6-month wait list for special orders. I had been on that wait list since August. I also called the production crew I had used for the property's architectural photography the previous spring. I told them I wanted Thanksgiving documentation. Real documentation. A drone, a full-frame camera, the kind of coverage that made a moment look like a memory worth keeping. On Wednesday, I drove to Columbus and picked up my grandmother. She had a rolling suitcase and a pie tin covered in foil that she had made from scratch in the facility kitchen. And when I helped her into the passenger seat, she patted my hand and said, "I always knew you were the one." I didn't ask her what she meant. I just drove. Thanksgiving morning was cold and clear. The mountains were at peak color, the valley floor still holding patches of frost that caught the early light. Diane arrived first, driving a 12-year-old Civic with a cracked windshield that I was going to handle quietly after the weekend. Raymond pulled up an hour later in a pickup truck with Tennessee plates, and he had brought his daughter, 24 years old and studying environmental law, someone I had not seen since she was in middle school. My grandmother sat in the Adirondack chair on the wraparound porch with a blanket over her knees and a cup of coffee in her hands, and looked at the mountains, and did not say a single word for about 10 minutes. Then she said, "Claire doesn't know about this, does she?" And I said no. She nodded slowly. "Good." The production crew set up just after noon. The drone went up first, arcing over the east pasture, before sweeping wide across the full property, the white farmhouse, the stone fences, the copper weather vane on the barn roof. The long table moved to the porch, and set with linen and candles and centerpieces. The florist had taken 2 hours to build. The photographer moved through the group quietly, catching Raymond teaching Diane a card game, catching my grandmother laughing at something I couldn't hear from across the porch, catching the moment the sun dropped behind the ridge and turned everything the color of warm amber. I looked at the table. I looked at these people, the ones my family had decided were not worth keeping. And I thought about the group text sitting unanswered in my phone. The photos need to look cohesive. The vibe Marcus's family is used to. I opened Instagram. I had never posted much, a handful of photos across 3 years, mostly travel shots, and one picture of a book I'd finished. My follower count was modest. It didn't matter. What mattered was that my mother followed me, and my mother could not stop herself from checking social media on major holidays, a habit she had developed when my sister began positioning herself as a lifestyle content creator, and my mother had appointed herself my sister's most devoted audience. I selected the drone footage first. The slow sweep over the property, wide and unhurried. The farmhouse and the mountains and the table full of people I had chosen. Then the still photo. My grandmother at the head of the table, her pie in the center, Diane on her left, Raymond raising a glass on her right. All of them caught mid-laugh. The mountain ridge behind them. The last light of November turning the whole frame gold. I wrote the caption carefully. Every word was deliberate. Thanksgiving with the people who showed up when it mattered. To everyone my family decided wasn't worth keeping. You were always the best part. The table is yours. P.S. The restaurant's open Thursday. I hear the walk-in freezer's running great now. I posted it, put my phone in my coat pocket, and went back to the table. I made it through dessert before my pocket started vibrating. Not buzzing once, vibrating continuously, the way a phone does when call after call rolls in before the previous one can finish. I did not take it out. I poured Raymond another glass of wine and listened to him tell a story about a supply chain problem he had solved, with 3 zip ties and a handshake. And I laughed, and the pocket kept going. Later, when the table was cleared and everyone had moved inside by the fire, I finally looked at the screen. 41 missed calls. My mother, 17 times. My father, 11. My sister, 9. A number I didn't recognize, 4 times, which I later confirmed was Marcus's mother. My mother, again. The voicemails had begun around 7. I put in one earbud and listened while I stood at the kitchen sink washing the good wine glasses by hand. My mother's first message was controlled. The kind of controlled that costs effort. Nora, call me back. We need to talk about what you posted. People are asking questions and your sister is upset. Her second message, 20 minutes later, had slipped. That caption about the restaurant was completely inappropriate and you know it. Marcus's family is going to think we're destitute. His mother is already texting Claire. Call me back right now. My father's first message was short and hard. Take it down. My sister's message was not a message. It was a monologue, delivered in the voice she used when she was close to crying but refusing to get there. Do you have any idea what you just did? We have been planning this engagement shoot for 3 months. Marcus's parents think we sent you money to fix the restaurant like we're some kind of charity case. His mom is asking his dad if we're stable enough for this wedding. I look like a complete idiot. You did this on purpose. You always do this. Take it down, or I will tell every person in our family exactly what you're really like. I dried the last glass and put it on the shelf. The post had been shared over 250 times. I turned my phone to silent and went to sit with my grandmother. She was in the armchair by the window, hands folded, watching the fire. She looked at me when I came in and said, "How bad is it?" "Bad enough," I said. She nodded, satisfied. "Good." I woke up at 6:14 the morning to the security system chime. Motion detected. Front gate. I checked the monitor mounted in the hallway. The driveway camera was infrared, sharp and clear in the pre-dawn dark. A silver SUV idled at the entrance. 2 figures standing outside it. My mother's posture is unmistakable. Even in night vision footage, she stands with her arms folded slightly above her waist, chin elevated. The posture of someone who has decided they are being wronged. My father stands with his weight forward, like he is perpetually about to interrupt. They had driven 7 hours through the night. I put on my coat and my boots and walked down the driveway at my own pace. The frost crunched under my feet. The mountains were just beginning to separate from the dark sky in shades of gray and deep blue. I was not in a hurry. I had nothing to apologize for. When I reached the gate, my mother was already speaking before I was fully in range. "Nora, open this gate. It is 6 in the morning. We have been driving all night. This is not how you treat family." My father stepped forward beside her. "That post is still live. You are going to take it down. And then you are going to call Marcus's mother and explain that the caption was taken out of context. And then we are going to have a real conversation about what you think you're doing." He said it with the flat authority of a man who had never once been told no by me and did not anticipate that pattern changing. I stopped about 4 feet from the gate. I looked at them through the iron bars. I thought about the group text. 16 minutes after the wire cleared. I thought about every holiday table where there hadn't quite been enough room for me. I thought about a facilities director in Columbus who was currently preparing a room with a garden view because no one else was going to make that call. "You drove 7 hours," I said. "We drove 7 hours," my mother said, "because you humiliated this family in front of Marcus's entire circle. His mother has been contacting Claire since 8 o'clock last night. Do you understand the damage you've done?" I posted a Thanksgiving photo, I said, with Aunt Diane and Raymond. Raymond's name landed the way I knew it would. My father's expression shifted. My mother's chin went up another 1/4 inch. "Raymond made his choices," my father said. "Raymond drove 4 hours to have dinner with your mother," I said. Whose name, by the way, was not on the invitation list for this weekend. A silence. My mother looked away, which was her version of flinching. My father shifted into a different tone then. Not the authority register. The negotiation, one softer, deliberate, the voice he used when he was trying to close something. "Nora, we are your parents. We are standing at your gate at 6 in the morning because we are trying to protect what this family has built. Claire's future is tied to this relationship with Marcus's family. You know how much this matters." A pause. "You've always been the reasonable one. The one we could count on." I had been hearing some version of this my entire life. The reasonable one. The one who handled things. The one who sent $12,000 on a Tuesday and expected nothing back. The one who could be counted on precisely because she had never counted on anything in return. Psychologists have a term for what I was watching. It's called an extinction burst. It's what happens when a person who has always controlled you through guilt, obligation, or emotional pressure suddenly finds that the pressure is no longer working. They don't walk away and reflect. They escalate. They push harder. They travel further. They arrive at your gate before sunrise, because their entire framework depends on you responding the way you always have. The behavior gets louder right before it stops, because it has never once had to face a door that didn't eventually open. My father wasn't here because he missed me. He was here because the tool he had relied on for 32 years had stopped responding. "I moved, Grandma," I said. My mother blinked. "What?" "I moved her to the Riverside facility, the one with the garden program. She transfers in 2 weeks. I've handled the cost. That is a family decision, Nora. You said the budget didn't allow for it. I removed the budget problem. The silence that followed had a different weight. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked somewhere past my left shoulder. Then a car door opened. My sister stepped out from the back seat, I had not seen her in the gate camera because she had been lying down. She was wearing a puffer coat over what appeared to be pajamas, and she was holding her phone in both hands, and her expression was the one she used when she had been rehearsing something during a long drive. "Nora," she said, "I need you to understand something." She held up her phone. On the screen was a photographed document, something formal-looking, with what appeared to be a notary stamp. Dad had his attorney pull the partnership disclosure agreement we all signed when he restructured the restaurant's LLC 6 years ago. The clause covers any family member who received material operational support from the business. You lived at home for 8 months during your last job transition. You used the restaurant's commercial kitchen twice to test a project. She moved closer to the gate. Dad's attorney says that establishes participation in the joint family asset structure, which means any significant assets you acquired in the following period could be subject to a partial family claim. She pressed the screen against the bars. "We're not asking for everything. We just think the family should benefit from what the family helped build. Sign a quick claim on 20% of this property and we walk away. Otherwise we file." I looked at the document. I looked at my sister, then at my parents. My father had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. My mother was studying the frost on the gravel. I had 2 thoughts in rapid sequence. The first, the agreement she was describing did not legally do what she thought it did. Using a commercial kitchen twice as a family guest established no equity participation under any LLC structure I had ever read, and any attorney who had advised otherwise was either incompetent or had been given a very edited version of the facts. The second thought, it did not matter, because this was never going to reach a courtroom. "Claire," I said. "What's the name on the deed for the restaurant building?" She frowned. "What?" "The building on Morse Road. Who holds the deed?" My father straightened. "We lease that building. We've always leased it. The landlord is." He stopped. A look moved across his face that I had never seen on him before. It was the look of a person doing arithmetic they were not prepared to do. "The landlord is an LLC," I said, "filed in Delaware. Acquisition date 14 months ago." I pulled out my phone and opened the document I had saved. "The LLC has 1 member." I turned the screen toward them. "That's my name." My mother made a sound that wasn't a word. "I bought the building when your original landlord listed it as a distressed commercial asset," I said. "He wanted it off his books before year-end. I saw the opportunity. I kept my voice even, the way I kept most things. I have been your landlord for 14 months. You are current on your lease through December, January 1st. The lease comes up for renewal." My sister grabbed the bars and read the screen. Her face went through several things very quickly before settling on something pale and still. "This says you're the title holder." "Correct." I put my phone back in my pocket. "I also purchased the note on the equipment loan you refinanced in March. The original lender sold the debt at a discount. I acquired it through the same LLC." I looked at my father. "Which means if you'd like to pursue a legal claim based on 2 visits to a commercial kitchen, you're welcome to do that. But opposing counsel will be representing the entity that currently holds your lease, your equipment loan, and has no obligation to renew either one of them." My father's hands found the bars of the gate, not in anger, in something that looked closer to vertigo. "You own the building." "I own the building," I said, "and I wasn't going to use any of it. I meant that, and I needed them to know I meant it. I bought it because I knew what the open market renewal would cost you. I knew you couldn't absorb it. I didn't want 19 years of your work to disappear because a developer bought the lot out from under you. I was going to tell you when the lease came up. I was going to make the renewal easy." I paused. I was doing what I always do. My mother sat down on the hood of the SUV. She put her face in her hands. "And then," I said, "you took my $12,000. And 16 minutes later you told me I wasn't the right aesthetic for the photos." Nobody said anything. The sun was beginning to edge over the mountain ridge. The light came in long gold lines across the frost on the gravel. "You can stay in the cottage tonight," I said. "It's warm. There's coffee set to brew at 7. Raymond is still here. And so is Diane. And so is your mother, who wanted to know if you were coming." I held my mother's eyes when I said that last part. "In the morning, I'd like you to go home. And I'd like you to think about what you actually want this family to look like, not for the photographs. For real." I turned and walked back toward the house. The frost was already melting where the sun had reached the path. Behind me, I heard my sister say something in a low voice and my father respond in a register I didn't recognize, something quieter, stripped of its usual forward weight. I did not turn around. Inside, I found my grandmother in the kitchen in her robe, standing at the counter with a cup of tea, looking entirely unsurprised. "They came," she said. It wasn't a question. "They came," I said. She handed me a mug. "Did you let them in?" I offered them the cottage. She nodded, satisfied with the distinction. "Good." She turned back to the window. The mountains were fully visible now, the valley floor still holding its shadow. "Your mother always needed things to look right, even when she was young. Used to drive me crazy." She took a sip of her tea. She forgot that looking right and being right are 2 very different things. I stood beside her and looked out at the mountain. I thought about what it had actually cost to become the person standing in this kitchen. How many years of being the reliable one, the reasonable one, the one who handled things without making noise about it. How many wire transfers and holiday absences and group texts I had swallowed whole because the peace felt worth keeping. How long I had confused keeping people comfortable with being loved by them. A table you are never fully invited to is not your table, and a family that calls only when they need something has already told you exactly what you are to them. I had just finally listened. That week, I had my attorney prepare a new lease for the restaurant. Fair market rate, 10-year term, renewal options built in. No leverage, nothing punitive, no conditions attached. I put the equipment loan on a repayment schedule slightly better than what my father had negotiated with the original lender. I sent both documents to my parents with a cover note that was 4 sentences long and did not include the words, "You're welcome." My father called the day after he received the paperwork. He didn't apologize exactly. He said, "I didn't know you had any of this," in a tone that was still deciding what this meant, the buildings, the money, or something harder to name. I told him I had it because I had always been careful and quiet, and because no one had thought to ask. He went silent for a moment. Then he said, "Your grandmother seems happy at the new place." I said yes. He said, "Raymond seems like he's doing well." I said yes. Then he said I should have called Raymond a long time ago. I said yes to that too. And I meant it. And I think he did as well. Before he hung up, he said, "The engagement photos this weekend. You should come, if you want." I told him I'd think about it. I meant that too. 3 days later, my sister sent me a text. No direct apology. My sister's apologies have always been formatted as realizations delivered about herself. And this one at least had the shape of honesty. "I didn't know how much you'd been carrying," she wrote. "I don't think any of us did." Then, after a pause long enough that I could tell she had typed and deleted something in between. "Marcus's mom loved your Instagram post. She told his dad your property is stunning and asked if we could hold a pre-wedding event there." I told her I'd ask. I set my phone down and looked out at the pasture for a while. Then I typed back, "Tell her the barn is available in April." I went out to the porch and sat in the Adirondack chair my grandmother had claimed all weekend. The mountain did what it always did, patient, enormous, entirely indifferent to everything happening at its base. I pulled my coat tighter and looked at it for a long time. They had spent 30 years managing the story, deciding what I was, what I wasn't, what fit the frame, and what needed to be quietly removed. And I had let them, because keeping the peace felt like love, and absorbing the slights felt like strength, and writing checks that disappeared without acknowledgement felt like what you did for family. But I had finally understood something I wish I'd known 20 years earlier. The person who always holds the table together is not the person who has the least value at the table. She is the table. And the moment she stops holding it, everyone in the room suddenly realizes they have nowhere to sit. I stayed on the porch until the last light left the ridge and the first stars appeared over the mountain. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I felt like I had finally stopped losing.